you come into contact with bad people on a kind of day to day as well. It's a fascinating life.
Well, frankly, I was really young at the time. So, I mean, that was 30 something years, more than that. So when you see that level of disordered behavior, like at that age, that's like really formative. I mean, I don't really do that work anymore. So I'm not in that ballpark anymore, that arena. But I look back and I think that was really, it was something else. It was like a
Yeah.
movie that I was in I was just playing a part or something. It was weird.
Yeah, but in the book you talked about like you did have an interest in kind of true crime, kind of like that serial killer, like kind of that kind of aspect from an early age. Like, was that
Yes.
part of a reason why you got drawn into that criminal law?
Who knows, right? Who knows why you end up doing what you do? I do think there's probably some decisions that I made along the way. I could either go here or there, and I went there because I was interested, and obviously just going down to see him at the very beginning was all about curiosity. I mean, it wasn't like I was like, yeah, I need a new client to represent for free. That wasn't
Yeah.
on my list of things to do. So it was really all about just having the experience of talking to someone who's a household word.
Yeah, and a household world globally. Like
Right.
obviously, I don't think I was born when he was committing them crimes, but like that, like he's still topical. That's the
Sure.
kind of crazy thing, uh, and it's almost the crazy thing with a lot of serial killers where. Like Ted Bundy's nearly just as relevant as he was probably back during his trial and crimes, and it speaks to probably our morbid fascination with like these sort of characters. Like I kind of have very loose theory on it that I think for a lot of people, like evolutionary, like you go into a lot of psychology in the book, which I want to kind of dig into as well. I think maybe it's a byproduct of being like a liar that you have to be able to read people. But I won't go on that tangent just yet. But I believe like the evolutionary, we evolved almost to be able to identify and to, like these sort of individuals that are capable of such crimes, such heinous crimes, and such destruction. It's very evolutionary beneficial if we're able to spot them and that if they become very novel in our psyche. And I think so. If you were on the Serengeti, or if you were out in like these maybe uh, like tribal packs, and there was something going on. There was some sort of murder, so there was danger, pretty much. I think that's probably what it boils down to. To be able to spot that very quickly is going to keep you alive way more than not being able to spot it. And I think that's where the fascination really comes. We're
Well, and
fascinated.
yeah, and I think the studies show that, women in particular are very interested in true crime, and they posit that it's because of exactly what you're saying, that we as women are always targets. I mean, you go out for a walk, no one's going to rob you, or you go out for a jog, you don't have any money on you, but if I go out for a jog, someone's got something else they want, right? So we're always protecting ourselves in a way that I think men just don't have, that chip. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We want to know who these people are,
Yeah,
because they're sitting among us. They're not. They're right out there.
they
In
are right out there.
different
Uh,
shapes and forms. Yep.
One of the most fascinating studies I seen was uh, it was I think it was out in the Middle East. It was pretty much along, or it was conducted during like war-torn societies and stuff like that. But the key finding was that like females in like war-torn or like countries that have gone through like a lot of conflict, uh, their sexual selection gravitates more for psychopathic males. And how they did the study was they showed like a series of like headshots almost, and like as you know, sometimes you even reference it in the book about Manson's eyes. And this, I think it was a guy came over during one of your
Hmm.
talks with John, and he was like looking for a lighter or matches, and he was like eyes were like
Oh yeah.
huge. But yeah, pretty much the big finding was that in a lot of these war-torn countries, that like the female sexual selection gravitates more towards the psychopathic male, and the theory then behind that theory is that it's because it provides some sort of evolutionary survival that Okay, yeah, this could be a psychopath, but like psychopaths, as we know, they tend to not really like defile the family, kill them like, too much. It's more like surrogates, victims, they're looking out there. The family unit tends to be okay. You go into like Richard Kuklinski and all, lived a normal, life. Like Bundy wasn't killing his girlfriend or anything. It was surrogates almost for his mom. But I just think it was a fascinating study of like that kind of survival trait, how it actually bores out. And that's why, I don't know, like why females are so drawn as well to true crime. Maybe it's trying to figure out, what to look out for danger, or maybe it's just morbid fascination as well,
Who knows? Well, and as I always say too, we're as a people, I think we are always fascinated by the best of the best, like watching the Olympics, watching great athletes or people do something really fabulously well. But we're also, in the same token, we are fascinated with the worst of the worst,
Definitely. But like, Karen, what was it like? So here's the thing that's like so apparent in the book, that like obviously we know Gacy, it was like 33 victims, like, like depraved, like the depths of depravity. But then he's calling you like dollface. You're having like a normal almost conversations, as much as a psychopath can have.
Right.
It's probably a bit like surface, but it almost creates this like insane dichotomy between murderous serial killer and like kind of charming, guy you could meet at a bar. Like, how do you think people are decompartmentalizing that? Like, what is it? How is that switch operating?
I think that you just have to understand that people who are like Gacy are very normal on the outside. They can conduct themselves very normally. And in Gacy's case, his sense of humor was such a prevalent part of his personality that, he was kind of fun to be around because he was always poking fun at himself, always ready for a joke, and it sort of just glossed over the fact that if you really dig into the conversation, he was very inconsistent. He was very manipulative. He was a liar. He was a bragger. He said what you wanted him to say in the moment and didn't mean it and would say something else in a different moment. But if you didn't pay attention to that and you didn't know that that's part of that personality, you would have an enjoyable conversation and probably laugh your ass off because he was funny. And that's why for all these years when I speak about this and I was writing the book, everyone who was coaching me said, you can't talk about a sense of humor because that's not funny. John Gacy's not funny. Well, he was funny, and I couldn't write a book about it without telling people that he was funny because I think it was an important piece of how he got away with things. And, I couldn't omit that.
Yeah, and it'd be comparable to trying to write about Ted Bundy and not mention that he's charming. Like, these people are. I think it's like the camouflage to use.
Mm-hmm. Exactly right.
That kind of sort of camouflage. But I think one of the most fascinating points for me anyway in the book was when you and Greg, you wanted to kind of come on as counsel. You talked to John anyway, John Wayne. He was like, a bit hesitant, kind of didn't want it. And then you had that kind of, I can't remember if it was a telephone call or a visit, where he made like this joke about, putting it on the T-shirts. But you said something that was really fascinating, that was like deeply psychological, I think, where it was like, he had to use humor to deflect the aspect that he was conceding in some way.
Right. With him, you had to make it look like it was his idea, right? So he's the guy in charge. He's the one who's running the team. He's the big dude sitting in his little prison cell, But that's how you had to manipulate him, because it was all about that narcissistic, feed my ego and I'll do anything, basically.
Yeah, but like, where did you learn that? Like, is there a Psych 101 in law school, or is is it an occupational thing that you just gain, like kind of osmosis?
No, there isn't. But I really will tell you that there should be a lot of training in psychology for lawyers, because we have to deal with our clients who a lot of them are disordered. They have problems. They run afoul of the law. They get divorced. They go bank. Whatever it is, they tend to have issues, right? Like legal issues. And legal issues usually arise because of some conflict, and usually that's a personality problem. But I also think that, just knowing how to deal with other lawyers, knowing how to get people to do what you want them to do, what is in their best interest. I think that as a young person, when I read a lot about the crimes and all of this reading that I did, I think I gleaned a little bit of that personality stuff. So I was able to kind of pull it out and use it. But it was sort of instinctive with me because Gacy was so obviously able to be moved in the direction. You just had to move his attention to something that he, that was going to appeal to him. And that is all ego, right? Everything ego, it was instinctive almost with me, I would say. Fighting with him was going to have the opposite effect, getting confrontational. And that's the whole thing with Greg, they kind of just butted heads, and, you know how that ended. So, it was so much easier to manipulate him than fight with him. Put it that way.
Yeah, it's almost you're
manipulate him back. I'm doing exactly what he's doing.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's where a lot of that's probably why he was so successful in business as well. It was like that kind of ego, like that drive, that ambition. And he could have been like a very successful person. It was this macabre darkness within. You allude to it in the book like a few times with, his dad and all. But what do you think creates someone with that sort of warped psychology? Because it's not the worst upbringing. His dad was, definitely harsh on him and definitely, call him, the queer and pansy and stuff because he was gay. But I think a lot of fathers would have been like that, maybe, that had gay sons for years. And they're not all going out burying 30 or so many bodies under the crawl space.
No, I think that's the key, and I try to speculate about that in my book over and over again. I mean, I'm sitting in front of this guy for all these hours and I'm saying the same thing, exactly the same thing you are, which is, how did he get from this little kid that I have the picture of him, in front of that house? And I know you're right. Back in those days, you weren't gay, and you had fathers who went to work and they came back and they spanked you and they drank too much and they yelled at your mom. And, this was a whole different world that was acceptable back then. But that doesn't cause somebody to murder people, 33. So, yeah, I think, as I said, I think I had an analogy about a tree. It's a little tree, but it sort of turns a little bit, just a little bit. The branch bends and then it continues to grow in that wrong direction. I think that's what happened with Gacy. I think that he confused violence with sex. I think that all of the violence that happened with his dad became normalized. He was angry and he didn't know how to he turned that anger around on kids who kind of look like him, smaller guys who were, that reminded him of himself at that age, probably. And the psychologists, have speculated that he was just killing himself, over and over again. I don't know if that explains it, but I don't know.
Well, we've seen that in other cases, with Bundy. It was very much these women that he was killing were almost surrogates for the rejection he'd felt and the betrayal he'd felt. Number one, with the betrayal that, his who he thought was his mom was actually his sister. Yeah. And then with, a girlfriend dumping him. So he was trying to erase the rejection. But yeah, it very much does sound that Gacy was trying to erase that, whatever that feeling maybe must have been that his father aroused in him. But what a grisly way to do it. I know in the book you allude that, I don't know if it's that changed, but you're not a religious person, but do you believe then in good and evil, or is this all just a complete hodgepodge of nature, nurture? As you said there a minute ago, wires getting crossed between, violence, sex, there's some sort of maybe sexual stimulation from violence. Is it just that, or is there a factor X there, some sort of evil that gets into people?
That's such a hard thing to answer because I saw good in Gacy,
Yeah.
I saw him with with friends and family and his children, and making decisions that were very moral. And he was on his moral high horse half the time I talked to him. But yet he had this lack of morality completely, in this area. I don't know. I don't really think people are good or evil. I do think there's a wiring. I don't even know that when they examined his brain, and I don't know, that was many, many years ago, and maybe we have better medical technology now, and maybe we would see something a little amiss with his brain. And as you probably know in your space, people who commit violent crimes have, if you go into the prisons, a vast majority of them have had brain injuries and head injuries. All of those guys. I mean, you go through all of them. They all hit their heads, and Gacy was one of them. And did that knock something that was already there? I don't know. I don't think it's evil and good. I just don't. I just think that the part of Gacy, the Gacys of the world, that morality. I call it you can kill somebody and eat a ham sandwich on the still warm body, right?
Yeah.
Like you and I, we just cannot do that. We are human beings. We can't, that would affect us for the rest of our lives in a way that would traumatize us. For the Gacys of the world, it was something he looked forward to. So what is that? Is that evil, or is that just a code that got shifted somewhere? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a reason why I like asking that question sometimes to guests, because nothing is it's very hard to have absolute evil, because you can find good in every, like someone will do a good act, and it's like what you alluded to there was like, the evil acts, like the behavior becomes evil, but like is the whole entity evil? And that's why it's really difficult to actually answer that question. But it normally leads down a really interesting kind of thought track.
And the converse is true too. I see people all the time, really good people, and they do something really bad,
Yeah.
and you say that act is not who they are, but yet they did it, right? I mean, prisons are full of people who are probably decent people who just did something wrong in the moment, whether it was out of desperation, out of anger, out of drugs, out of, you name it, but they're not all evil.
And that's what my dad always said from, after I did 30 years working in the prison service, that people that made one, like for the majority of people, like some go on to be career criminals, but for a lot of people, it's like one stupid thing. Maybe they're drunk or, make one stupid mistake. You actually brought something up in the book that I hadn't thought about in a long time, but I remember when I read it again, it was so relevant. But it's de-individualization. And like this explains everything. Like we're like in Ireland anyway, I know in the US it's probably same. Like there's so much rioting now, or kind of like, protesting. There's so much acts that's going on, and sometimes it's really hard to understand it. And it was only when I reread that again in your book where I was like, de-individualization explains so much. It's like Lombardo talked about it kind of with the madness of crowds, but it's what, like, when you're trying to even understand like what happened in, the Nazi camps or anything like that. The minute someone puts on a uniform, or the minute someone, like even to a very lesser degree, maybe would go on a soccer pitch or a football pitch to put on a jersey, people become different once they have like this de-individualization process take place, which normally is like a mask, or it's like a uniform, or it's something. But when I read that again, it explains so much. I think you were talking about it in the concept of, John, when he used to get into the clown outfit,
Yes.
which was a sense of de-individualization as well. But I think you alluded to also that, he wasn't dressed like that when he was killing. But it's such an interesting topic that, people become transformed when they get into a uniform. Like, did you ever feel like that when you get into, I know you were talking about one of your colleagues when she went to sea and she was in the powder blue wool suit, but I'd like vivid flashbacks. This is in the 90s that a lot of the lawyers would have wore like them wool suits. But did you even find like when you put on that, you had a different aura of power, or you were more assertive getting into that lawyer's kind of wool suit?
Well, for sure. Yeah, for sure. But I think that I realize those things when I do something like go to a Halloween party.
Yeah.
where you're in a mask or you're playing somebody else or you're dressed up as whatever character. I was just in New Orleans a couple of years ago for Halloween, which is really a lot of fun. And I was in character with some friends, and I just found that I was doing and saying things that were pretty like not something that I would normally do, but because I was in my character, I wasn't myself anymore, which was kind of fun. I really kind of enjoy that for a short period of time, but I can understand that, and I also see that in texting and emailing. People text things that they would never say to my face, ever, ever, ever. You call them right up and they're nice as pie, but that text was because there was no face, there was no communication, there were no social cues, there were no personal things that bring human beings together to be nice to each other, to get things done. It has created, I think, a whole different world for people in business and personal too.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the big things. Like sometimes I really kind of think about it, like it's like almost situational psychopathy, where people can be like, especially online or when there's anonymity. I think that's the big thing. Like I'm not sure if you watched that, like Squid Games and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
even the elites, like I
that.
love that, even where they are, even in the mask, like, and like they're just, it's so, it's so evil almost the way they're going on, but the mask almost hides the humanity. And it's like you explain it really beautifully in the book as well, where it's almost a downing of morals. It allows the individual down their morals or reduce their moral thresholds. And you gave a really good example as well, where it's like Jason as in Halloween. The mask is so important, and it's literally what allows these. Well, I'm not sure, I can't remember with Jason, but the evil act becomes so much more tolerable when there's a mask or there's a costume. And I'd never really thought about it like that way with a lot of villains or a lot of these, like even kind of horror movies, like the villains in it. But it happens so much in real life that I'd never thought of.
Absolutely. And you when you watch it happen, it's really good to analyze it, because sometimes it doesn't make any sense. But again, like I think to me, as a lawyer, when I'm analyzing why people are acting the way they're acting, I try to understand it before I react. That comes to you when you get older. My age, I don't want to I don't want to be a pinball. The law is more like a chess game. I tell my clients that it's not about reacting and getting angry and screaming in court. It's all about having a strategy. It's about thinking about where you want to go and how you want to get there. It's like it is a very long game at litigation. So so if you understand that, you understand why people are acting that way, you can kind of get them out of that de-individualization. That's a word that's really hard.
De-individualization. No, it's a tongue twister.
It is a tongue twister. But if you get them out of that mode, and that's why I'm a big one for personal meetings, which are really gone these days. People, sometimes I don't even do it via Zoom. But if you're talking to a person and you're looking at their eyes and you're watching their social cues and all of that, there's a whole different level of connection. Even if you were having this conversation with no video, I don't think it would be as good a conversation, just because I wouldn't be able to pick up on your animation, and same with me. So that makes total sense.
Yeah, it's the same. I work in sales as well, and like it's like the in-person meeting is how you're closing a deal. It's very difficult to do over like Zoom and like any sort of virtual format, because I think there's something about proximity that's like really it's more engaging anyway than.
And I go back to, you say Darwinism and evolution and biology and, I think we are animals, we have to remember that. And as animals, we are creatures of we're social creatures, most of us are, and we want that connection. And when we don't have those social cues and we don't recognize social cues, like some people maybe on the spectrum, it's very difficult to navigate a world when you don't have those abilities. So you see people who are autistic find other things they can do. They have other skills that they develop that are amazing because they don't have that. So I agree. Those things are really part of who we are.
Yeah, definitely. Karen, even to take you back there a bit as well, obviously, like you would have been, like fairly new out of law school and all, but like when all this media storm was going on, like when you and Greg took on this case, like you describe it very well in the book, but it just sounds like it must have been so overwhelming for someone that's still, finding their feet in life, never mind just in their profession and stuff like that. Like, how did that affect you? Like, because obviously John Wayne Gacy was, public enemy number one, and any association was almost put you in the firing line with him. But how were you dealing with that? Like, because I know you alluded to you didn't you're not a big drinker. What was your outlets then for like stress release?
Yeah, it was really something else. It was like I was almost like having an out of body experience, saying, wow, look at that person, from the minute I'm up. And so we didn't have social media back then, right? That was before all of that. So you can imagine how bad it would have been, with all the social media and people like texting me and, calling me all kinds of names. But yeah, it was just wild. I mean, I knew that this was going to be, get some attention for sure. But Gacy had been in prison for, all these years. And, like I was in high school when he was convicted. And, so, I mean, you flash ahead all these years. But I had no idea it was going to be the media storm that it was. And I really wasn't, I was naive for sure that I thought, okay, I'm a lawyer. I represent guilty people and innocent people. I represent everybody. I represent anyone and everyone. That's what I do. This is, you zealously advocate for your client. That's what our code says. And I have to do that. And I don't believe in the death penalty, even for Gacy. So whatever. I don't have any problems with my morality. I'm not letting him out. I'm just trying to save his life. And he deserves that. Everyone deserves a lawyer at every step of the way. So to me, like, don't blame me. This is our system. But a lot of people did blame me. It got very personal. It got very, very personal, and it got threatening. And, as a woman, I was the only woman on the team. I think people in general felt that they could pick on me because I was the weak link, maybe, or they could make fun of me, or they could, say things that were really awful. And it really got focused on me. But again, I really had the presence of mind for a young lawyer to try to analyze it, like, don't take it personally. Why are they doing this? What about them are they doing? Like, do you not understand the system? Do you hate Gacy so much that you're going to just spill your hatred on me? That's okay. I get it. You were sexually abused and you don't like people who sexually abuse young boys. Oh, I get it. Hate me. I don't care, but I just want to understand why you can't separate that idea. Like, I'm not condoning Gacy. I didn't stand up and go, he's the greatest guy in the world, and he should walk free, and he should go to the circus with kids around. No, that was not what I was doing. But I think people want to hate bad, and anyone associated with bad. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, and like, I can only imagine. I think you said it there a minute ago. If it wasn't now in today's time with social media, oh my God, like, it must be so difficult for people that do get caught up in that kind of media storm that you got caught up in the social media age, because like people, as we talked about, that kind of de-individualization, when there's anonymity, people, like, the worst of people comes out. Like, the threshold for morality drops to like an all-time low. But yeah, like, and so like, what were you doing? Was it just like laser focus? Look, I have to get on with this. It's these people are angry at him, and I'm just a conduit for that. Like, or was it just like power on, just kind of ignore it, like bury it, like, what was the?
That's exactly right. That I was a conduit for people's hatred, and the other thing that I will tell you is it was easy for people to leave me a message or send me a letter. But whenever I'm in a room and someone, I have that, that stink eye, like, yeah, who do you think you are? You represent some like real, jag, right? But they're the first ones who come up and go, tell me about him. What was he like?
Yeah.
So, you know what, you could hate me, but you want to hear what I have to say because it is pretty interesting, right? So, and I find that when I'm in a room and there's human contact, again, it's harder for people to dismiss and to disparage me because they understand that I'm a human being and that I'm not evil and that I'm just trying to do what I would do for you or your teenage son who goes and, drinks too much and kills a family of 5 in a car accident. Yeah, it's me you call. You don't call the nice guy. You call the lawyer who's going to represent people from all walks of life. That's me. So you might need me, so be nice to me.
If that's it.
I hope you won't need me. But
yeah, I hope this is my only time chatting. Well, a former criminal lawyer. I hope there's not too many of these. But Karen, even to go back there a bit, right? So, because I know there was a good chapter in the book where you kind of go into the Cram and Rossi, and kind of like, because this is so pertinent to the case. But in my opinion, and again, my opinion means jack all really, but they had some sort of involvement. I think they had to, in court they were drawing maps and they had a full understanding of where bodies were, and the whole pretty much thing was dug under by them. You're as close to the case as I can talk to almost. What's your theory there with number one, the snuff film ring, or whether Cram and Rossi were in on it in some way? We know from the victim that survived that he was saying there was other people in the room, but look, I don't want to go on a tangent. Just what's your thoughts on it?
Well, I have come to learn that serial killers, you think of them as lone animals. They're not. A lot of them recruit people to do their work for them. In fact, there's a good book that's out. It's being a documentary is actually being screened in a couple of weeks. I'm going to it in Chicago. An author who wrote it is a friend of mine. It's called Serial Killer's Apprentice. Highly recommend it. It is about the Candyman down in Texas. Dean Corll. And they say that Gacy kind of did some of the same things as Corll did with the torture board, and he had 2 young men whom he recruited, and those boys, they weren't like the worst of the worst. They were coming from kind of bad families, and they looked up to this guy as kind of a father figure, but he paid them to procure young men.
Yeah.
Paid them more if they were good looking. Bring the boys there, they would dispose of the body, they would hide the body. These kids were involved deeply in these crimes. I think Gacy had his 2 accomplices. I think those kids either helped procure, they helped, perpetrate the crimes. I think that one of the things in my book that I talk about is that Gacy had very good business records. And so when he was out of town, he had records that showed that he was out of town. And he kept saying to me, I didn't kill this boy, I didn't kill that boy, I was out of town. And I'm calling bullshit on you, John. But he goes, get my records. So I got the records, and sure enough, he was probably out of town during some of these murders. So what happened? I think these young men were continuing to abduct young men, maybe wait until Gacy got home. Who knows how it all worked out? But they were involved. No question about it.
Yeah.
No question. In my mind.
I 100% agree. And you know what? It's so interesting there that you bring up Dean Corll, because the thing that I think combines both of them is Dean Corll obviously came from a very affluent family. They had a candy empire. John Wayne Gacy, again, did very well. Money, you take these vulnerable boys off the street that have nothing, and suddenly they have this kind of sugar daddy, or I don't know what you call it, but someone that has means that they would have never maybe experienced. Now I know actually Rossi, there is a bit of a red herring there, because Rossi did come from an affluent family, but someone that can kind of look after them. Money can manipulate people into doing all sort of things, and then they get caught up in maybe the weirdness and the macabre, and there's some sort of thrill that they didn't anticipate.
That's exactly right. Their father figures there's money, but then the manipulators like Corll and Gacy would say, you're involved. You know what? You're going down. It's almost like a blackmail situation. If you continue to do this, all I have to do is make a call, and Corll would threaten these kids. I know people in the mafia, and I know that I can go and tell your family, and I've got proof that you did this. And all of a sudden, they're complicit. They can't get out of it, right? So they feel like they're now trapped. And that's how good these serial killers are. They know who they can control, and they know how to control them, and they know how to use people to do what they need to do. They're excellent at it.
Yeah, and their whole life is manipulation. Like that's the number one weapon almost in a psychopath's arsenal is that kind of manipulation. They're ramped up to it. One of the like I had a guest on before, Emmy Thomas is her name, but she's like fully fledged. She's actually a lawyer as well, but yeah, like really high on the psychopathy scale. She wrote a book, Confessions of a Sociopath. But she was telling me towards the end of the episode that she went for therapy, like, 'cause she's a Mormon, like a devout Mormon. So obviously, like, there's a struggle there between like God and the psychopathic tendencies, obviously, because they're you know, they're not congruent. But she went to therapy for years to try figure out could she, and like obviously there's no known therapy to really reverse psychopathy. It's very much on a neural level, but she did, like, which was the most fascinating thing for me, that someone that loves psychology, was that the therapist got her to engage in the world as if she was the only person in the world, because every time she was having a conversation, it'd be like me trying to predict what you'd like me to hear. So every question I'd be coming at, or every answer, or everything I'd be lining up for you to think, oh, wow, I really like that, or I really like that. And when she had to imagine that she was the only person in the world, there was no one to manipulate, there was no game to be played, and she could actually feel who she was for the first time. And I think, number one, that's just so fascinating, because number one, like, psychopaths getting that kind of a psychological epiphany revelation is fascinating anyway. But I think that's almost, it just shows the level of depth in a psychopath's mind for manipulation. It's a constant game of trying to predict what will make you think better of me.
Right. I was just asked to speak about the Idaho murder defendant, and, you know, speculate, of course, what his motive was, you know, as if there's a good motive for anyone to do what he did. But, you know, I do think it's important to try to figure that out. Like, for him, you know, and this is slightly different, but I think he wanted to feel something. I think that he probably didn't feel the same way. He saw those beautiful, lively kids having fun and laughing and showing emotion, and he didn't have access to that in his own body. He wasn't able to feel the joy. He wasn't able to laugh. He wasn't able to do any of it. So he wanted to feel that. He thought, maybe I'll commit the perfect crime. I'm a criminologist to be, you know, is in his education.
Yeah.
And I want to feel like I did something important and big, and maybe I'll finally feel like those young people did. I'll feel some sort of passion or something. And, you know, because what he did and how he did it was really brutal. And now we're finding out more details about that. But again, if you're wired that way, that you would kill 4 people just to feel something, you know, think about how disordered you are. I mean, that's an understatement, right? Yeah.
You, like, Karen, you hear that so much in testimony, that why did you kill? Oh, I wanted to feel it. I wanted to feel what it was felt like to kill, or I wanted to feel something. Where it's obviously, it's like the ultimate taboo, maybe that, and maybe, you know, pedophilia, but it's, you know, these people are seeking to kind of break the ultimate taboo. But with that guy, I can't remember his name again, that Idaho guy, but he was like, that was a brutal murder. And like the fact that he was a criminology student, you know, probably thought he had the intelligence to be able, because he had a good indication of forensics and stuff, probably thought he'd get away with it, that supreme optimism, that glibness. But yeah, thankfully he was caught. Like, so yeah, I can't remember what you said there. Are you involved in the trial, or you were kind of?
Yeah, I do legal commentary for News Nation and some of the local Chicago things. So I'm called upon to talk about crimes and about the legalities, and occasionally I do get asked about the psychology, you know, and of course I'm speculating because I'm not a psychologist, and I didn't you know, interview him or give him, you know, Rorschach test. But, you know, I just, having seen all these criminals over the last 30-something years and watching their crimes and reading their psych reports, it is very, as weird as these people are, they're weird in the same way. You know what I'm saying? They have the same maladies. They have the same types of reasoning and rationale. And, when I was, talking about this, I was thinking about Gacy, and, I think his was a little different. I think he was a predator. I think it was about sex. He sex and violence to him was all in one. And I think it was a compulsion. I'm not saying that he didn't have free will, because he did. Everyone does. But this was just a compulsion, and it kept escalating and escalating. I do think, though, that the Idaho murder guy, if he weren't caught, he would continue to do that.
Yeah,
I think he was a serial killer waiting to happen. I think he was a mass murderer because he killed 4 in one, but I think he would have gone on to stalk and kill people. Until he was caught.
Yeah, and I think comparing that to John Wayne Gacy's time, I think modern society isn't as conducive now. There's so much surveillance, phone records and all. I don't know what sort of, because people are going to have them compulsions. I don't think that's going to go away, but they're going to have to adapt to the environment. And that's the thing. I think thankfully, because he could have gone on to kill 30 victims. If he had been back in the 70s, I guarantee you he would have went on to kill and kill and kill and kill. It's only now, law enforcement and forensics has sophisticated to the level where it's able to, catch them before they turn into the multiple murderers, thankfully.
No, you're absolutely right. They're now one and done, right?
Yeah.
And because it's, with the DNA, with the cameras, everyone's recording everything. You think about Gacy, I think about this all the time. Would he have been caught? I mean, he was arrested several times. He spent time in jail, as you know, in Iowa when he got caught doing something to a boy. And then he got out in Chicago, and he was arrested several times, and charges were dropped. And I mean, it's almost, you look at that and you say, did he have some pull? Was there some connection that he had that he kept getting a pass? As you know, one of the famous pictures with Gacy is him standing next to Rosalind Carter, Jimmy Carter's, wife. And you say to yourself, he was a felon at that time. He had served time in prison already, and he's standing next to, where were the Secret Service? Well, he got past that. So that goes to how manipulative he was and his connections and all of those things.
Yeah, that's it. And not to get tinfoil hat and stuff, but it does seem honestly, there were so many multiple times where he was let off, and it just seems bizarre. Maybe it's just a different time. I'm trying to I'm obviously trying to go back to what that time must have been like. Was it more lenient? Was it, he's a successful businessman, nothing to see here? Maybe the law enforcement was a bit treated that a bit more. And it's probably still like that. Some rich guy gets caught doing something, he might get a bit, even in now times, but back then I can imagine it would have been more exaggerated. But yeah, it does seem weird that he got a free pass there a lot of times.
He did, and it's sort of like Dahmer. Sometimes the police officers, they see a gay relationship back in those days, and it was boys will be boys. Yeah, go do whatever you need to do. But yeah, it was very dismissive toward the gay community for sure. And I also think that the police were there was no CODIS, so there was no uniform system of where, who is committing crimes. Even among the different districts in Chicago, there was no connecting. There were paper files, right? So you didn't have hey, we got a serial killer here. Someone went missing, and the Venn diagram leads to Gacy, right? It would have, if you did that, you would see that they all either worked for him, they were in a bar that he frequented, they were in the neighborhood, they drove a car that was seen at his house. I mean, all of that probably would have been caught so much sooner, but the times were very different.
Yeah, times very different. One of the most hair-raising moments in the book for me anyway was when you and Greg were in with John, and Henry Brisbane is in the periphery, and John was like, that guy's a head case. What was it like? And you know what, Karen, I'd never heard of that I-95 case. I only looked it up after. My God, that was so horrific. But yeah, what was it being like around people like that? If John Wayne Gacy saying that guy's a a bad person. Like, that must have been hair raising for you.
Well, absolutely, because Gacy, was the world record. Among all the people on Illinois death row. I mean, he blew out all the records, right? But he was very, he was very ordered, and he was very polite, and he had rules, and I knew he wasn't going to hurt me. First of all, I wasn't his type. Second of all, he needed me, and he needed to use me. So I was safe with him. Like I was never afraid of him. But the other dudes there, yeah, because they were like, really unregulated. And I had a couple stories about people in that lockup who were not controlled. That if they would have no compunction about coming over and doing something to me, and the guards are locked in glass, a glass cage, so like they could kill me, and the guards would mosey out there with their, and try to help me. Probably not. But Brisbane, I mean, here's a guy who just, joy killing people, just horrible. Yeah, scary guy, really scary guy.
Yeah, terrifying. And like, so Karen, in your, like, because obviously you must have met, like, you've probably met the best of people and the worst. Like, who is the worst you would have met? Like, who's the person that put the biggest chill maybe up your spine is probably the best question.
Yeah. Actually, there was that young kid. It's a story in my book. He was the youngest guy ever on death row in Illinois. He wiped out his whole family. Like, he was 20 years old. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he killed his mother, father, brother, sister, like everyone, because he was playing his stereo too loud. They were getting on his case, and he had to kill them. And he had what I call Manson eyes. Whenever I saw him, he had eyes that were just, I'm telling you, there was nothing there. And he was a tall guy. He wasn't, he was imposing. He was volatile and really unwell. Especially, when you start your life out at 18 and you're in death row with all these better criminals, seasoned criminals. He was scary to me. I did not want to be anywhere near that guy.
Yeah. And like, I think they're because obviously the serial killers are methodical. They need a certain level of almost strategy and kind of control.
Yes.
Or an organization. I know they have kind of two definitions, disorganized and organized, but like typically serial killers tend to go into the organized category. But then I think anywhere in life, even if I go into a bar, and there's someone that's like unpredictable or volatile, they're the person that it's immediate danger because you can't predict what they're going to do.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Like, and my dad always said, like, in the prison system as well, it was, the lifers, the people that were in for life, were typically the really nice people, like, really, like, obeyed the rules, didn't cause any harm. But it was normally like the kind of street thugs that were like, cause all the trouble, really volatile people that cannot temper any emotion, that are like, maybe drugged up or stuff like that. But yeah, it's interesting with that Tom Odell. I actually don't know too much about his case, but like, family annihilator kind of he just seems like and there's something so flippant. It's like level 10 psychopathy. Turn down your stereo and you just go murder the whole family. That is just wild.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right about the predictability, because the prison has, and your dad knows this as a person who worked in the system, but there's a hierarchy and there's a whole world. The prison has a whole system of, structure, sociological structure, that you kind of have to understand how it works, like who's got the power. And usually it's money. So Gacy had access to money because he was painting and selling all these horrible paintings. And so he had the ability to buy things at the commissary. And something as simple as buying, some Doritos might make you a person who is powerful, because God knows we all want Doritos, right? So if he can buy you something from the commissary, he has power. And so he was protected in some ways from some of the, the violence, which is always there, because you got all these guys who are violent, all in a very small place with no air conditioning, with bad heating, with bad everything, bad food. You're going to have violence, and there was violence. And Gacy was stabbed by Brisbane, actually. Henry Brisbane stabbed him for, just for having fun, I guess. That was just
the hell of it.
Just the hell of it.
Yeah.
Right? Interesting.
And so, Karen, tell me, like, life then after all this, like, You know, you mentioned there you're out of criminal law. Like, you know, how was life after like all this defending Gacy? Like, you know, how did your life change, I suppose?
It's the strangest thing, but you think that would be really bad for me because it was such an unpopular thing to do, but everything got better. And if I give speeches, to women in the law or like lawyers and stuff and about career stuff. And I always think about this. I trace all of the good things in my career back to Gacy. And this is why. So like, for instance, the dean from my law school came to me and said, hey, would you want to be a professor at University of Illinois? It was, number 13 in the nation at the time. I'm not an academic. I would never be a professor. I'm just not wired that way. But he made me a professor, and I started being a professor. And I taught at different law schools for 25 years, which gave me credibility, right? So then, because of all the media stuff I did, I got a radio show with my partner. I've been doing radio in Chicago, hosting live radio for 30 years. And won awards and all of that stuff. And then the television, because I've been on television, I got to know all the people locally and nationally. CNN, Fox, all these stations would call me. And if you want to remember back to 1994, when Gacy was executed, it was only about 3 weeks later that O.J. Simpson took that ride in his Bronco on the freeway. So I was there to be a commentator for the O.J. Simpson case. I was a member of the California bar in addition to Illinois, so I was able to talk about the law in that state, and I became a commentator. So I've been doing television for over 30 years. So all of these good things, and people for some reason, and it has no correlation to me being a good lawyer or not. I think I'm a good lawyer, but I'm not saying there's a correlation. Because I took on that case, people think I'm tougher. People think I'm smarter. People think, hey, Gacy hired her. They were getting ready to kill him. So maybe I should get her because she's tough. It makes no sense. But that's how people think. That's why the Alan Dershowitzes of the world and the F. Lee Baileys and all those people, they get a name because they are called upon by the worst of the worst to represent them.
Yeah, do you know what? But you know what I think from reading your book? Obviously, I'm not in America. I haven't heard like your radio or on radio or anything like that. But from reading your book, like I get the sense that this person is incredibly adept at understanding people and being able to see. Like I think probably why you were such a hot ticket and is because you're able to see beyond the crime. Like you're able to see between. You're going to get so much flack for representing this guy, but you have a moral compass that's telling you, okay, death penalty is wrong. There's a moral gumption, there's a moral underpinning. And then, like, throughout the whole book, you're able to see, like, you have that kind of, I know you're saying you're not a psychologist, but you very much have a psychologist's mind. You're able to understand people, you're able to understand the motivations. And I can imagine for people wanting someone to comment, it's like why I wanted you on the show as well, because you're able to, like, you're able to give your opinion by combining all this, like the law experience, the kind of moral gumption that's able to like withstand the kind of negative press, and then to be able to do it also in a way that's able to understand people like from an almost empathetic standpoint. And I think that's kind of a rare thing. It's like three things combining in one. I think that's what gives such a unique take.
Thank you. I take that as a compliment. And I think you're right. I think that, it doesn't matter what you do. If you're a lawyer, you're a salesperson, to understand people's motivations, it gives you such a step up in anything you do, whether that is your spouse or your child, and navigating, raising kids, or your boss. Like, why is your boss doing this to you? Why is someone bullying me in the workplace? Why is this person not, supporting me? And you just try to understand it. You try to be, as you said, empathetic, because empathy to me separates us from the Gacys of the world. I can put myself in your shoes. I may not like your shoes, but I'm empathetic enough to figure out why you're doing what you're doing. And, because if I can get at that core or twist it a little bit or even just put a name to it, right? Just say, hey, I get it. You're envious. Okay, I get it. And you whatever. So now I get it. So now I can work around it or address it straight on or what have you. But if you can't identify it, name it, then you don't know what you're dealing with. It's like operating without eyes and ears, really.
Yeah. You're kind of going in blind, into blind. I know you like in the early chapters of the book, you were talking about like you could have had a tough ride coming up. Like that sexual harassment was like omnipresent, really. Like, has that changed then in law? Like, or do you see, or even in like society? Because it was nearly uncomfortable to read. Like, you have these people that are like, okay, they're not a Gacy type where they're going out killing people, but they're destructive, malignant, narcissistic. I'd say even kind of borderline psychopathic people that are just like, I think you said it. Like, it's not even about the sexual attraction to these people. It's about power. Like, do you think that like society has sophisticated now where like that's broken down a bit, or do you still see the kind of trail ends of that in pockets of law or business or wherever you are?
That's definitely one of the threads in my book that I wanted to keep in, because it was worse when I first started. I mean, I've been a lawyer almost 40 years, and when I started, I mean, the stuff that was said to me, like I look back and I think, oh wow, I'm surprised I stayed in the law, because physical groping, and hey, I had a story about going to a business trip, and the guy who was the head partner said, hey, there's only one room, we have to stay together, right?
Jesus.
So the hotel guy said, no, there's a lot of rooms here. So I mean,
oh my
that
God,
stuff happened, and then I had to work with him. He had to be my boss, after that. So again, I think things are better. I do. I think things are much, much better than they have been. And unfortunately, the people who do this kind of stuff, they are doing it, not like you said, not because they want to date you, because there's a way to date somebody, and that's be nice to them, and not try to overpower them with your sexual come-ons. That's not imperfect dating. That's power play, right?
Yeah,
so,
it is.
But I think as I'm older now and I'm tougher, and I think I give off the vibe, don't mess around with me. I think I do.
Yeah.
And I think when I was young, I didn't have that, frankly.
Yeah. And I don't think anyone has stuff like that when they're young. Like even, I think men and women, like people are just like, whether it'll get bullied in workplaces or like the groping stuff is insane though. Like that people would take that royalty, like, our liberty is just, it's so gross. And like, I hope like that, I think, we're stepping forward, I think, in the right directions. And I think, like definitely, it's like, was it uncommon then for like women as much to be in law back then? Was it more male dominated back then, or was it?
When I was in law school, it was the first year that it was 50-50 men and women. We were just starting. But the thing in the law, as in many professions, you have equal men and women going to law school and graduating, but women fall off the track. And a lot of them go and maybe raise a family, or they work part-time while raising a family. Being a lawyer and working part-time is almost impossible. So, and then you also see a lot of women who don't get treated well. They don't get paid as much. They get harassed. They get whatever. They don't get the plum assignments. I watched it, and I think they fall off, and then they go into doing something else, or whatever. I think things are better now, but I still see it. I absolutely see it. And I see women treat women horribly too. It's not just men at all. In fact, I will tell you, and I love women, and I always looked for women mentors in my career. But I think that men have helped me more, frankly, have been better mentors to me, because I feel like they didn't look at me as a threat, and they knew I could be an ally.
Yeah. And then envy.
Better is that?
Envy can like seep in and stuff like that. Which is, again, hopefully, but I say hopefully, but then I literally in 2019, I thought war was a thing of the past. Like I thought that was it. Like, we've reached some sort of like higher self-actualization, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We're right coming up to the pinnacle, and then next minute it breaks out. So, I kind of, I never count my chickens now like that. Hopefully we'll just keep progressing and not take these step backs. Like, whether it's wars or stuff like that. And like, sometimes I'm reading that Handmaid's Tale at the minute, and it's like,
Yeah.
God, it's just like stuff like this freaks me out, because I just hope we will get to a stage where, we can, like, progression is actually progression, and it doesn't descend into chaos to come progression again.
I agree with you, and I do think that I call it like trickle down. So you walk into a workplace, if you've got a boss at the top who's mistreating people in whatever form that comes in, whether that's racism or sexism or just bullying, that whole workplace is damaged, right? Because people say, oh, I can continue to do that. You see this everywhere in a courtroom.
Yeah.
If the judge is being a jerk, then all the lawyers start being jerks too. But, without getting political, you look up to our political people, or our people in the entertainment business, whatever it is. If you see them doing bad things, I think there's a trickle down. I think it's like, hey, he can do it, I can do it. Yeah, I think it's like we need to lead by example and have really good people be those role models, and to have people stand up for the people who maybe are marginalized. There's nothing harmful about it. In fact, it empowers me to help other people. It makes me a powerful person. Why wouldn't I help somebody? Like, there's enough room for success everywhere. If I do you a favor, I'm not doing it because you're going to do me a favor, but it's karma. Even you just call it karma. You throw the good in, and the good comes back to you. And that's one of the strangest things in life, but it's really true in my view.
Yeah. And like, Karen, you hit the nail on the head there. Like, look at Gacy's, his role model would have been his dad or the father figure. And like, if that person is acting atrociously, like, that atrocity almost weaves somewhat into your psyche. And then, like, whatever way it's going to manifest from individual to individual. So 100%, like, and that's why I think, like, leadership is, like, it's so important, but like, it has to have, like, almost a level of sacrosanct, like, where it's, like, when you're leading people, like, their decision, their behaviors, their thoughts and stuff like that, there's a level of responsibility to act impeccably. And I think I think that level of leadership has been almost wiped out, like, across a lot of places, because it's like populism. Now people are only saying stuff to be popular. It's like like, you go on Instagram, you go on TikTok or anything like that, all the real content's gone. People are only saying stuff now to serve the algorithm, and what serves the algorithm is a bit more sensational, a bit more novel. And it's like, I find that almost in the cultural zeitgeist as well. It's the more sensational, the more hyperbolic, talking points become popular rather than actual substance. And I just hope that reverses.
Well, and I think that, in some ways, who wants to be at the top of the heap?
Yeah.
Because, then who runs for the offices, who becomes at the top? Maybe those people are attracted to it for the wrong reasons, because they're narcissistic, because they want the power and control, and they want to wield power over other people, as opposed to do good, or to be a role model, to do good in the world. I mean, and you used to see politicians who did that. They made money in the private sector, and then they ran for office because they wanted to do good, and they did.
Yeah.
And I feel like you see that less and less now. Now it's about them, and it's about their control, and then you have, again, that trickle down where people feel like they need to control other people because they're being controlled.
Yeah. It's a bizarre one, but I want to end this podcast on, I think, it was only a small bit in the book, but I was so hooked on it. And this was your dad. He's someone I would have loved to have on the podcast as well. It was in, like, with Frank Sinatra. Like, I can imagine when he was doing his stand-up comedy and stuff like that, comedy wasn't a big thing. He sounded like a really cool dude. Like, tell me about your dad.
My dad was the best. Oh my gosh.
Honestly.
It's the best. He was a stand-up comic. When he was a kid, he was in movies. So he was from a very poor family, and he got on the bus with his mother, who was an immigrant from Italy, and they went and did a screen test in California, and he became a little movie star. And then he went into World War II, and he entertained troops there instead of shooting people. And he then came out and worked for Hugh Hefner and opened up Playboy clubs and did stand-up and he did, state fairs. And so we traveled with him quite a bit when we were young to go to the different conventions and stuff like that. So my dad was very funny, and he was funny on the stage, but he was also he was a student of comedy. And so he saw comedy in everything. So, I feel like I've got a little of that, although I can't tell a joke to save my life. I do like to look at the humorous side of things, because if you don't, that you can really go downhill fast, especially when you do stuff like, see the tragedies I see in my profession.
Yeah.
You have to laugh at some, obviously not with the client, but you have to just find some levity, because you got to cope with the bad things in life. But my dad was great, and he was so much fun to be around. I miss him every day.
Oh, I'd say, yeah, like he sounded like an amazing dad, just an amazing life as well. And I love the way you put that in the book, because I think it just adds an extra interest. Like, obviously you're reading about the book is you kind of more geared towards John Wayne Gacy, but having that little kind of tangent was so interesting, and it helped maybe, I think, frame the readers, and I listened to it as well, an audiobook, the listeners, a bit more around you as well, kind of getting that bit more of a family history. So it was so interesting, and I just said I'd have to bring it up.
My dad taught me something, and he said, when you are a comedian and you're up on the stage, you have to get people to like you first before they're going to find you funny. And I used to think, does that make any sense? But he said someone like Don Rickles, who you probably don't know, he's an old-time comic, but his whole gig was insulting people, and it got racial, and it was really, he was really funny at a time. You probably couldn't get away with it now, but you still liked him. He was self-effacing. He would make fun of himself. And that was why he got away with being so nasty, because you liked him despite yourself, so he taught me that. My dad taught me. So when I was writing that book, I thought, you're not going to like me because I represented Gacy, right? Because you got all these haters. But if you understand me, and maybe you get to see, who I am and where I came from, and what formed me and what brought me to this place, then maybe you're like me a little bit, and then listen to my story, right? Because I want you to listen to my story. Liking me is one thing, but I want you to listen to my story, and you can disagree with me, but at least you've heard it, right?
Yeah. I think that's a lot in sales as well, like if you get the buyer to like you, like the sale goes through, it's easier. It's an easier way in. It was fascinating. And it's fascinating even to hear, the kind of why you added that and stuff like that. As again, I think you're a very deeply psychological person, and that, maybe you don't realize it as much, but like a lot of these things are like, or maybe it's like high empathy, but you're able to understand a lot of these, kind of processes that would typically be psychological, but maybe that's kind of forms with a liar, or maybe that's just you either. But it is a fascinating, kind of thought frame to be in.
Yeah, just understanding and being empathetic. Those are the things that I would like to leave on this earth a little bit for people.
Well, definitely. Well, that's a lovely way as well to end this episode. I just can't recommend your book as much. I'm going to link it down in the description. I know a lot of the listeners are kind of interested in true crime, so I can imagine they'll be interested. But look, thanks so much for coming on as well. It was just so interesting to actually hear who you are as well, not just about the case or anything like that, which sometimes you probably get swept up into. Actually talking to you, understanding your story a bit more. I think that's why I like doing these podcasts, is getting that sort of insight, meeting these sort of people. So yeah, look, thanks so much for giving up your Saturday morning.
Well, thank you for having me, and I really look forward to people reading my book. And I love when people email me. I get emails sometimes from Australia and Portugal, and I read your book, and I don't even know how they got it, but I love hearing even the bad stuff now. I don't care. Give it to me. I find it interesting that it causes people to talk and think, and that is something that I really appreciate. But thank you for having me, and thank you for reading the book and actually understanding where I'm coming from. I appreciate that. I appreciate your empathy.
Well, look, thanks a million, Karen. It's been an absolute pleasure, and all links will be below, so you'll know where to check it out. Thanks a million.
All right, take care.